How you doing, guys? It's Philip McKernan and thanks for tuning in. Today I want to talk about a legend who has just passed, a gentleman by the name of Peter Lehmann, who is an Australian winemaker, legendary in many cases, not just within Australia but around the world for what he did, what he stood for and everything else. I was very fortunate to meet Peter on a number of occasions, actually sit in his kitchen on a few and have a couple of glasses of wine. I think on one occasion I had a glass of white wine in my hand. I think it was even before midday Australia time. So I have very fond memories of not just him but his family. And it kind of struck me, there's one of the most brilliant, intuitive, inspiring stories, that business stories that I've ever heard is Peter Lehmann. And I'm going to attempt to recite the story as I remembered, as I've heard it, maybe with some poetic license in there. So again, don't quote me word for word, but this is my memory of the story. And it started back in the sometime in the mid-70s when there was a glut of wine, essentially grapes or juice, in the industry. And the company that Peter was working for at that particular time chose to say no to the local farmers and say, listen, we're not going to crush the grapes, we're not going to take on any more juice essentially to turn into wine, because the market is just not sustaining it. Peter had a different view, and Peter's heart was saying to him, listen, these are local farmers who have been loyal to us. We owe them something, and they're literally their bread and butter is harvesting grapes, bringing it to the winery and crushing it to make wine and so on. They get paid obviously for their crops. So Peter was outraged, frustrated, and made a strategic decision from a hard place center, like a hard place, as opposed to a heady place, because at that time there was almost little or no justification. In other words, if you took out a laptop or a computer and did the numbers, or a calculator, it would have made no sense to do what he did. So he couldn't necessarily raise the capital immediately, so he was kind of forced into a corner where he had to follow his heart or his head, and his head was saying, listen, just tell the farmers we don't want the grapes. Do what the company were saying. But he followed his heart and he stepped in and he went to the farmers and said, I can't afford to pay you for your grapes, but what I'll do is to make sure that it doesn't go rotten and that you can protect the juice, which essentially is the important piece. We'll crush the grapes, we'll put the juice in, and then if I can sell the wine, I'll pay you. So what happened was, that's how Peter Lehmann Wines was born. And I hope I'm doing the story some justice. Again, it's many years since I heard the story. But what was brilliant about it was that he followed his heart. He just would not let these people down, and he became very popular, not just because of his decision making, but he became very respected, I suppose, in the world of wine, particularly by the growers. So you can imagine how they looked after Peter for many years to come in terms of giving him really good quality stuff and great service, etc. And the great twist of the story is many years later there was an aggressive takeover of Peter Lehmann Wines from a huge kind of bottling, or a huge kind of liquor giant in the world of global brands. And Peter did not want this company to absorb Peter Lehmann Wines into their portfolio, because they just become a stat or just a number. And when all the chips fell and when they came down to voting and going for the big offer, etc., I believe, and this is my understanding, that the actual decision was swayed by a very, very small minority of shareholders who just happened to be the growers who Peter originally looked after back in the 70s. So this is like 15, 20, 30 years later, whatever it was. And it was brilliant that their loyalty came back to the table, and they just said, listen, no matter what happens, whatever Peter wants, we're going to basically honor that. And I just think it's a beautiful twist, and I think that the lessons in this little story are the following: is that sometimes strategic decisions don't have to be from your head always. Strategic decisions can actually come from a more heart place. And while there's almost no logic to it, and it doesn't make financial sense, and there's every reason why you shouldn't do it, sometimes you just follow in and lean into something that makes sense. In fact, something just came to me. On a personal level, I run a retreat in Ireland once a year. And years ago, when I did my stag party about 10 years ago, we went to a particular part of Ireland. We brought all my buddies, to a castle, and we did some, kind of personal development, and there was mixed reactions to some of it liked it, some of it didn't like it. And it inspired something in me, in my heart, not just to actually, bring my message to the world or attempt to inspire people to change the quality of their lives, not to settle, and to live a more authentic, inspired life. But in actual fact, it was that geographical area that spoke to me. And somewhere in my heart, I don't think I had the confidence at the time and I had so much doubt in my own ability that it didn't come to me. But years later, I decided that I'd run an experience in Ireland, a retreat in Ireland. And I remember having a lot of fear around it and would people come? And I mean, I'm based in Canada and, you know, to some extent in the US and doing a bit of speaking, but are people going to come all the way to Ireland? And it's funny, the first year we got it up and running, the second year we got it up and running, and this year we've actually sold out well in advance. We have a waiting list. So it's not to try and impress you, but to impress upon you the power of really following your heart and your intuitiveness that can actually guide you, even when logic just goes against it. And my heart goes out to people that you live very much in a heady place, because I believe that people who live in their head a lot of the time are missing so much opportunity just to allow life unfold. I think there's a wonderful balance that can be achieved between the head, which is a gift as well, and more of an intuitive place. I said at a retreat recently, I said there's a number of people in this room that you're so heady, it would be fantastic if you didn't have to carry your bodies around. Like if we could just put two little legs just on your head, that you wouldn't have to expel all this energy carrying your body around, because really you probably don't need it because you're just so heady. And it was a kind of a joke, but I think a number of them actually looked at me and kind of got what I was trying to say, that sometimes we're so caught up here. So the lesson is, you know, how you treat people comes back, I think, years later. Number two is just following your heart and not assuming that strategic decisions are completely limited to your brain and your mind. I just don't believe that's the case. And I just think it's a kind of an inspiring story. And Peter just passed away literally a week ago or so in his early 80s. So he had a fairly, you know, long life, I suppose one could say. Maybe not long enough for other people, but thinking about legacy, I believe that Peter Lehmann wines are great, but that's not, in my personal opinion, the legacy he left on an inspiring level. I think the legacy he left is, apart from a wonderful family who I know very well, and the story of how he set out into his business, and I believe continued his business as much as he could as it got bigger, to continue to respect people who basically are a fundamental part of our business. And I think we all kind of can learn something from that, is about, you know, the workings, the people that support you. They can really have a big impact on your business, and sometimes we take those people for granted. So anyway, this was out of honor for Peter Lehmann, and hope you like the little story, or you found something useful in the little story, and you know, maybe someday get a chance to pick up a bottle of one of his reds. In fact, he does a wonderful wine called Mentor, and highly recommend it. Thank you. Take care.